Welcome to Science Store online classes.
Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.
Welcome to all my dear students. Today I am taking biology class. Under that we are studying the chapter plant kingdom. Okay, we have studied all the different types of divisions of the plant kingdom, that is algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes, gymnosperms and angiosperm. In last class we have studied about the how the gymnosperm, the general characteristics of the gymnosperm, as well as the fertilization, how the reproduction takes place in the gymnosperm, that we have studied there. Very important, the structure of the female gametophyte is called as embryo sac. Under that we have studied, we have seen different types of the cells and how the fertilization takes place, and pollination, the term pollination and double fertilization is very important, and syngamy and triploid fusion, that is all important concept of the angiosperm, you have to remember. And in this chapter we are going to study about the plant life cycle and alteration of generation. Today we are going to study about plant life cycle, how the life cycle of the plant, each division of the plant takes place, and we are going to study alteration of generation. Alteration of generation. Here in this plant life cycle there is alteration of generation, means each generation will alters from one after the other. Here by each generation, usually in plants you can see two different generation, that is gametophytic generation, I have told gametophytic generation and sporophytic generation. These are the two different generation in plant kingdom, plant divisions, which alters one another. If the gametophytic generation first takes place, then it gives rise to the sporophytic generation. If sporophytic generation completes, it again moves to the gametophytic generation. So this alteration of the generation is called as alteration of generation. This alteration, alter of this generation one after the other, the generation alters, that will call it as alteration of generation. Based on this we are going to study different life cycle of the plant. Before that we will see how this gametophyte and sporophytes are developed. Here this gametophyte and sporophyte contain two kinds of the spores, that is haploid and diploid. Based on this haploid and diploid condition, we can differentiate gametophytic plant and sporophytic plants. Hey, you know, haploid ಮತ್ತು diploid cell basis ಅಲ್ಲಿ ನಾವು gametophytic generation ಮತ್ತು sporophytic generation ಅಂತ differentiate ಮಾಡ್ತೇವೆ. I am explaining here. Both haploid and diploid undergo mitotic division to produce the plant body. Here both the cell undergo mitotic division and produces the plant body. Okay, here the haploid means single set of chromosome, here diploid means two sets of chromosome we can see. So here both the generation, both the cells having both cells undergo mitotic division. Okay, here if the haploid cells undergo mitotic division and it produces the gametophytic plant. It produces, if haploid plants undergo mitotic division and produces the plant body, that plant body will call it as gametophytic plants, which give rise to the formation of gametes by mitotic division itself. ಯಾಕಂದ್ರೆ ಇಲ್ಲಿ gametophyte ಅಲ್ಲಿ single set of chromosome ಇರ್ತದೆ. Here we can see one set of chromosome. So if again it will not undergo meiotic division, ಅಂದ್ರೆ meiotic division ನಾನು ಹೇಳಿದ್ದೇನೆ reduction division, it is a type of reduction division. So again in gametophytic plant it is containing haploid cells, again it won't undergo meiotic division, so they undergo mitotic division and produces gametes. Okay, they produce gametes. That's why that plant body we'll call it as gametophyte, gamete producing plant. Phyta means plant, gamete means the male and female reproductive cells which is able to undergo fusion. Okay, fusion ಆಗಲಿಕ್ಕೆ ಏಬಲ್ ಆಗಿರುವಂತಹ cells produce ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ಅದನ್ನು ನಾವು gametes ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತೇವೆ. ಈ gametophytic plant will give rise to the formation of gametes by the process of mitotic division. Okay, understood how the gametophytic plant generation started? Okay, next this fusion of this gamete will give rise to the zygote formation, right? Zygote formation, that is diploid in condition. This will give rise to the diploid condition. Zygote, fusion of two gametes which results in a fusion. This haploid gamete, n plus n, what happens? 2n. So this is diploid. Okay, here 1n. This is haploid gametes. So this gametes will fuse and form a diploid zygote, and this zygote undergo mitotic division and produces the independent and plant assumes the plant body, green photosynthetic plant body, that will give rise to the formation of sporophytic plant. Okay, that will give rise to the formation of sporophytic. When the diploid cells undergo mitotic division and produces the plant body, that plant body will call it as sporophytic plant body. Here this sporophytic plant body may undergo meiotic division, they undergo mitotic division as well as meiotic division and give rise to the formation of gametes. Okay, it may give rise to the formation of gametes or haploid spores. Idena sporophytic generation diploid condition alli irudrinda they are able to undergo meiotic division. Yakandre two sets of chromosome irtade. So if it undergo reduction division, each cell get half number of the chromosome. In diploid cells meiotic division adre enagutte, one cell get the chromosome but other cell is not able to get the chromosome because only one set of chromosome is present. So here we cannot, in the haploid cell we never see the meiotic division, only in a diploid cell we see the meiotic division. That you are going to, what is a detailed process of this meiotic and mitotic division you are going to study, but just you should know the basic concept, basic things of this mitotic and meiotic division. Okay, mitotic illi ಆಗ್ತದೆ, diploid cells alli meiotic division ಆಗ್ತದೆ, that gave rise to the haploid spores. Again these haploid spores may give rise to the gamete formation. Okay, gametophytic generation ಗೆ lead ಆಗ್ತದೆ. If the sporophyte which give rise to the spores, in case of pteridophytes ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗುತ್ತೆ, spore produce ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ಅದೆಲ್ಲಿ ಹೇಗೆ what it happen, it will undergo the gametophytic generation. So that gametophytic generation will later give rise to the formation of the gametes. Okay, this is the basic concept of the life cycle of the plant cell, how the which are the two types of cells present, which are the two types of the generation, how they are formed. Okay, let us study about the three different kinds of the life cycle. Okay, based on the alteration of generation we can see mainly three types of life cycle, plant life cycle. First one is haplontic life cycle. Second one, diplontic life cycle, and third one is haplodiplontic life cycle. We can see Three types of the life cycle based on this alteration of generation, based on this alteration between sporophytic and gametophytic generation. We can see three main types of the life cycle, that is haplontic life cycle, diplontic life cycle and haplodiplontic life cycle. We will study one by one. Okay, first it is in haplontic life cycle, which contains a maximum, the plant body contains a haploid types of cell. Here we can see the haploid types of the cells. Here mainly we can see the gametophyte, this gametophyte will lead to the formation of gametes by gametogenesis. The process of production of gametes is called as gametogenesis. Here it directly the cell will cell will not convert into gametes. They undergo sequential cell division and produces the gametes. Okay, this gametogenesis will produce male and female gamete. Okay, here male and female gamete will be produced. Here they undergo mitotic division, because the gametophytic plant itself haploid in condition. It itself a haploid in condition. They undergo gamete formation, and these gametes also haploid in condition. This takes place mainly by mitotic division. Fusion of this male and female gamete will give rise to the formation of zygote. Okay, will give rise to the formation of zygote. Okay, zygote. Here the zygotes are diploid in condition, because they fuse, two cells fuse, two sets of chromosome will fuse and form a zygote, which is diploid in condition. In this generation, what happens? The zygote will not show any sporophytic generation. Directly this zygote will undergo meiotic division. This directly undergo meiosis and produces spores. Okay, this zygote immediately undergo meiotic division and produces the spores, and spore will germinate and produces the gametophytic plant. Okay, remember this will call it as haplontic life cycle. Okay, here why we call it as haplontic? Here the diploid condition or sporophytic condition only confined to the zygote part. Here only in the zygote part we can see the diploid condition or sporophytic generation. Here maximum generation or the maximum life cycle is shown by gametophytic plant. Okay, maximum life cycle of the plant or the major life cycle is seen by gametophytic generation. So that type of the gametophytic means haploid condition. So that life cycle will call it as haplontic life cycle. Haplo refers to haploid cells. Okay, haplontic life cycle. What happens, one more time I will explain. The gametophytic plant is a main plant body. They are green photosynthetic independent plant body. They are green photosynthetic independent, and they also thalloid. Usually these gametophytic plants are thalloid in nature, where we cannot differentiate true root, stem or leaf like structure. We cannot differentiate. So that it is thalloid body, and this is the main plant body which give rise to the formation of gametes by mitotic division. The gametes will fuse and form a zygote. Only the zygote will show the diploid condition or sporophytic generation. So here immediately zygote undergo meiotic division and produces the spores, and spores again give rise to the formation of and germination of this spore will give rise to the formation of gametophyte. These this type of life cycle we can see in algae. Most of the algae will show the haplontic type of life cycle. For example, volvox, Spirogyra and Chlamydomonas. Chlamydomonas will show volvox, Spirogyra and Chlamydomonas will show, most of the algae will show haplontic type of the life cycle. Remember students, only algas like volvox, Spirogyra, these are the few example. Most of the algae will show haplontic type of the life cycle. Okay, very important. And next we'll move to the one more type, that is Diplontic life cycle. Here in Diplontic life cycle, the Sporophyte is the main plant body is Sporophyte. Here independent photosynthetic and well developed plant body is Sporophyte. It is the main plant body is Sporophyte. Here the Sporophyte undergo meiosis and produces two gametes. They produce male and female gametes. Okay, and this gametes, male gamete, here the directly from meiosis the male and female gametes are produced and they undergo, these gametes may show the gametophytic condition. They may show the female and male gametes, as in case of gymnosperms and angiosperm we have studied. The gametes, the pollen mother cells and the egg mother cell, or this egg mother cell, megaspore mother cell will give rise to the formation of male and female gametophyte. Here we will see male gametophyte and female gametophyte, and it produces male and female gametes. Female gametes, they produces male and female gametes, and this will fuse and syngamy. This process we'll call it as the fusion of male and female gamete, we'll call it as syngamy. The syngamy takes place, which lead to the formation of zygote. Zygote later develop into embryo into seed. Okay, seed into new sporophyte. Here in this diplontic type of life cycle, we can see the main plant body is sporophytic in nature. The major the generation will be seen by sporophytic, we see is sporophytic generation. Here the sporophyte undergo, some cells of the sporophyte undergo meiotic division and produces male and female gametophyte. They undergo male and female gametophyte meiotic division, which give rise to the formation of male and female gametophyte that produces male and female gametes, and this gamete will fuse, undergo syngamy. The fusion of male and female gamete takes place, and this lead to the formation of zygote, which is diploid in condition. Syngamy aguvaga two gametes fuse agtade, so the zygote is diploid in condition. Okay, they are diploid in condition, and this zygote undergo division and form embryo. They undergo mitotic division. Illi mitotic division agtade, no meiotic division. Only during the production of gametes there is a meiosis. Okay, the entire here the zygote, embryo, seed and sporophyte are diploid in condition. So embryo is diploid in condition, seeds also diploid in condition, and that give rise to the sporophyte. And this type of life cycle we'll call it as diplontic. Here the gametophytic generation is only confined to the limited period. Okay, here the gametophytic generation is confined and they are not independent. They dependent on the main sporophytic plant body. They are not independent. So they confined to they are present inside the sporophytic generation. So sporophytic plants. So here this will show the gametophytic generation, and this life cycle we will call it as Diplontic. This will call it as Diplontic life cycle. Very important, usually seen by all the gymnosperms and angiosperms. Will show Diplontic type of the life cycle. Okay, here the independent green photosynthetic plant body is Sporophyte. Then gametophytic plant generation is dependent on the Sporophyte. We cannot see an independent gametophytic generation. So they dependent on the Sporophyte. So the maximum portion, maximum life cycle is shown by the Sporophytic generation. So that means diploid condition. The maximum generation show the diploid condition of the cell. So that type of life cycle we will call it as Diplontic life cycle. Okay, this type of life cycle we will call it as Diplontic life cycle. Okay, very important, maybe ask for your examinations. Okay, next we will move to the one more life cycle, that is okay. Next, one more, in few plants we can see the intermediate. Here is some algae like fucus. The advanced type of algae, fucus, also show Diplontic type of life cycle, except fucus, all the algae will show Haplontic type of life cycle. Here the fucus will show the Diplontic type of the life cycle. Okay, in bryophytes and gymnosperms you can see the intermediate life cycle. They show the intermediate life cycle, that is Haplodiplontic life cycle. Here both the conditions, Sporophytic generation as well as Gametophytic generation are having a equal importance. Here they both show the independent structure. Okay, let us see how they will show. Okay, first one is Sporophyte. First we will call it as Sporophyte. Sporophytic generation. Here the Sporophyte may be independent and free living structure. Okay, as a first we will consider in bryophytes. Here Sporophytes are dependent, these structures are dependent on the gametophytic plants, but they show well developed Sporophytic well developed plant body for the production of well developed structure for the production of spores, that will call it as Sporophyte, which is developed from the zygote. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಏನಾಗ್ತದೆ, zygote immediate ಆಗಿ gametophyte ಆಗಿ develop ಆಗೋದಿಲ್ಲ. Instead it undergo some modification and produces a sporophytic generation, sporophytic structure. Inside this sporophytic structure you can see the spore production, and this sporophytic generation is dependent on the gametophyte. They are dependent on the gametophyte. They partially or completely dependent on the gametophyte plants. Okay, let us see. The sporophyte will undergo meiosis and produces spores. Okay, they undergo meiosis and produces spores, and these spores form gametophyte. This undergo gametophytic generation. The spores will germinate and produces gametophyte. Okay, here the gametes, here the gametogenesis. By the process of gametogenesis there is a male and female gametes are produced. This is haploid in condition, this is haploid, this is haploid, and fusion will take place. Syngamy will lead to the formation of zygote, which is diploid in condition. Okay, later this zygote will give rise to the formation of sporophyte. Here, from here to here, you can see the development of the gametophytic. This is sporophytic generation and this is gametophytic generation. So they show independent sporophytic structure as well as gametophytic structure. So this type of life cycle will call it as haplodiplontic life cycle. This we can see in bryophytes, where it dependent, this gametophyte, this sporophyte may be dependent on the gametophyte, partially dependent on the gametophyte. They are also photosynthetic in nature. ಕೆಲವೊಂದು ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ bryophytes ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಈ sporophytes independent green ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ, photosynthetic natural ಇರ್ತದೆ, but for the nutrition or the water supply they dependent on the gametophyte. But here we can see both structure, specialized structure, both generation are dominant here. ಉಳಿದ cases ಅಲ್ಲಿ haploid gametophytic condition dominant ಇರ್ತದೆ. In diploid life cycle you can see sporophytic generation is dominant, but here both the generation are dominant, so that we'll call it as haplodiplontic type of life cycle. As in case of pteridophytes, we can see the development of sporophyte. Okay, here the independent green photosynthetic structure is sporophyte. Green, leafy and vascular containing photosynthetic structure is sporophytic, and that sporophytic generation will give rise to the production of spores, and that spores will produce a gametophytic structure. We'll call it as prothallus. Alva prothallus production ಆಗ್ತದೆ. Prothallus, that is a gametophytic plant body, will call it as prothallus. This prothallus will give rise to the formation of male and female gametes. Male ಮತ್ತೆ female gametes ಅನ್ನು produce ಮಾಡ್ತದೆ. So that undergoes syngamy. Again due to the syngamy, zygote will be formed, and the zygote later develop into embryo and give rise to the sporophytic generation. Here in pteridophytes, here in bryophytes, the sporophyte is dependent on gametophyte, or partially they dependent on the gametophyte. But in pteridophytes, they are in pteridophytes, the sporophyte and gametophytes are independent plant body. Here the sporophyte as well as the gametophytes are independent plant body. They are independent. Here the sporophyte is well developed. You can see well developed vascular system, leaf system, root system alla well developed ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ. But gametophytic is independent, but they are thalloid, photosynthetic thalloid in nature, where we cannot differentiate the root, stem or leaf like structure. Simply the mass of the cell will be formed. Okay, prothallus and the structure form ಆಗ್ತದೆ. So that is gametophyte. They are also independent plant. They will not dependent on the sporophyte, or sporophyte is not dependent on the gametophyte. So this here both the generation are show maximum, they show both same dominance. Okay, here the same, they share equal importance between the gametophytic as well as sporophytic generation. If one generation is absent, the other generation will not be formed. Okay, in each life cycle, if one generation is absent, the next generation will not continue. So very important, both these gametophytic and sporophytic generation is very important for the plant body. If one absent, the next generation will not continue. Hege the gametophytic will produce gametes. Okay, if there is no gametophytic generation, the gamete will not be produced. So if there is no gametes, there is no zygote formation. Zygote formation illadidre there is no sporophytic generation. So one dependent on the other. Here the alteration of generation is very important because one stage, one generation is dependent on the another generation. Okay, this type of generation usually seen in Diplontic types or type of life cycle. We can see in both bryophytes and pteridophytes, and some of the algae like ectoderm, some of the algae like ectoderm and ectocarpus and Polysiphonia will show the Diplontic type of life cycle, and except fucus that show Diplontic type of life cycle, all the algae will show Haplontic type of life cycle. The examples may be asked for these three different types of the life cycle. The examples for Haplontic life cycle, all the algae, Spirogyra, Volvox, Chlamydomonas, can give example. For Diplontic life cycle, you can give example of gymnosperms and angiosperms, and for Diplontic type of life cycle, can give examples of bryophytes as well as pteridophytes. Along with that, the ectocarpus and Polysiphonia is a good example for Diplontic type of life cycle. Okay, these are the very important concept how the Diplontic. I have drawn the life cycle of each algae, bryophytes, pteridophytes ಮತ್ತೆ gymnosperm, angiosperm ಇದು life cycle draw ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ. Depending on that you can study this Haplontic, Diplontic ಮತ್ತೆ Diplontic life cycle ಅನ್ನು ನೀವು ಕ್ಲಿಯರ್ ಆಗಿ ಸ್ಟಡಿ ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. Okay, this is about the life cycle and alteration of generation of the plant. Okay, life cycle of the plant, very important, how this alteration of generation is important, and how the life cycle takes place within a plant. Okay, here all the sporophytic and gametophytic generation are multicellular in nature. Here in bryophytes, the sporophytic generation is short-lived because it is seen only at the end of the season. Here usually the sporophytic generation is only seen in the end of the season, which partially dependent on the gametophyte, and this life cycle is short-lived. Here this life cycle is short-lived, and here in pteridophytes the gametophytic generation is short-lived because the maximum plant body, the major plant structure, plant life cycle you can see in sporophytic generation. Here the sporophyte will be formed, will later to give rise to gametophyte, and these are short-lived. Okay, at the end of the season the gametophytic generation will be formed. At the starting stage of the life cycle, usually bryophytes pteridophytes ಯಾವಾಗ ಡೆವಲಪ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ಜನರೇಷನ್ ಅಂದರೆ ನೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್ ರೈನಿ ಸೀಸನ್ ಆಗುವಾಗ ಜನರೇಷನ್ ಆಗ್ತದೆ. ಸೊ ದಿಸ್ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಸ್ ಅಂಡರ್ಗೋ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್. ಓಕೆ, ದಿಸ್ ಸ್ಪೋರ್ಸ್ ವಿಲ್ ಫಾರ್ಮ್ ಅ gametophyte, and immediately after the gametophyte you can see the major sporophytic generation, and here the gametophyte maybe they are completely independent. They may be saprophytic or photosynthetic in nature. Usually pteridophytes elli grow ಆಗ್ತದೆ, some dark ಮಡ್ಡಿ ಆರ್ಗ್ಯಾನಿಕ್ ಕಂಟೆಂಟ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಇರ್ತದೆ ಅಥವಾ ವೇಸ್ಟ್ ಡಿಕೇಯಿಂಗ್ ಸಬ್ಸ್ಟೆನ್ಸ್ ಎಲ್ಲಿ ಇರ್ತದೆ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಗ್ರೋ ಆಗ್ತದೆ, ಆನ್ ದ ಸರ್ಫೇಸ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಟ್ರೀ ಬಾರ್ಕ್ ಆರ್ ಆನ್ ದ ವಾಲ್ಸ್ ವೇರ್ ದ ಅಕ್ಯುಮುಲೇಷನ್ ಆಫ್ ದ ಆರ್ಗ್ಯಾನಿಕ್ ಮೆಟೀರಿಯಲ್. ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಸಿ ದ ಡೆವಲಪ್ಮೆಂಟ್ ಆಫ್ ದಿ ಸ್ಟೆರಿಡೋಫೈಟ್ಸ್. ಸೊ ದೇ ಮೇ ಬಿ saprophyte. The gametophytic condition of the pteridophytes may be saprophytic or they are photosynthetic in nature. Here mainly the gametophyte is thalloid in nature. Okay, illi also here in bryophytes also they may be, the gametophytic condition may be thalloid or erect. They may be thalloid or erect. Bryophytes alli I have explained. Sporophytic ಏನಿರ್ತದೆ, they show specialized structure, special shape will be formed. Okay, in bryophytes. Sporophytes pteridophytes alondu you can see the main leaf, main plant body with the leaf, well designed leaf. I have shown the diagram, that is sporophytic condition of the pteridophytes. We cannot see the, usually we cannot see the gametophytic condition. It is very small, microscopic in nature. Gametophytic generation, pteridophytes iddu gametophytic generation tumba microscopic ಆಗಿರ್ತದೆ. We cannot clearly see the gametophytic generation. Okay, but in bryophytes we can see both the sporophytic and gametophytic generation well. Okay, once we should summarize the class about the plant kingdom. Plant kingdom idu class summarize ಮಾಡುವ, where first we have studied about the classification systems, that is where there are different types of the classification system based on the generation, based how we take the characteristics, that is artificial, natural and phylogenetic system of classification. And also we can see we have studied the different branch of the taxonomy, that is numerical taxonomy, cytotaxonomy and chemotaxonomy. And next we have studied about the different divisions of the plant kingdom. That first division is algae. Under that we have studied different other general characteristics of algae, their reproduction and uses. Uses is very important, where these algae are used for various purpose. And next we studied about the different classes of algae, that is Chlorophyceae, Rhodophyceae and Phaeophyceae. Their general character, sexual mode of reproduction, pigmentation and cell wall content, these are very important under the different classes of the algae. Next we have studied about the important class, that is bryophytes. In bryophytes we have studied the general character, how the reproduction takes place, how the different types of the sexual organs are developed, that is antheridia, archegonia developed, and how the antheridia will give rise to the formation of antherozoids, and archegonia what it contains, that we have studied. And the uses of the bryophytes, where some of the uses. And also under that we have studied two main classes of the bryophytes, that is liverbirds and moss. These are the two different. Here the liverbirds is thalloid in nature. We cannot differentiate the true root, stem or leaves, and some of the liverbirds may show leafy like appendages, okay, on the central axis, the advanced type of the liverbird. And in mosses we have seen the root like, stem like and leaf like structures, and they have two main life cycle, that is two main stages, protonema stage and leafy stage. Okay, here the reproduction takes place by fragmentation as well as by secondary protonema. I have told the secondary branches of protonema is called as secondary protonema, and that give rise to bud. If that secondary protonema will break and will be carried to some other place, it will give rise to a new plant, new colony of the mosses will be developed by the secondary protonema. That is a mode of asexual or vegetative type of reproduction. And also we cannot say asexual spores will not be formed in the bryophytes. And next we have studied about the reproductive structure, archegonia, antheridia developed on the branches, axial branches, and that lead to the formation of the sporophytic structure that contain food, seta and capsule. Okay, next we have studied about the pteridophytes. Here in pteridophytes we have studied the general character, main plant body, and they show a small specialized, if you observe, okay, that is not needed for your extra knowledge. This pteridophytes, if you see the young bird, it shows a spiral arrangement. If you observe, if you are interested in a plant study, you can observe the pteridophytes. I have shown the plant of pteridophytes. If you observe the pteridophytes, you can see the spiral arrangement of the leaf in bud condition. This condition we will call it as circinate venation. Not important, just I have told this type of bud we can see in pteridophytes. Usually in ferns you can see this type of structures. Okay, and next we have studied about the general characters of pteridophytes, their sexual mode of reproduction and their importance. Usually these pteridophytes are important for medicines, and some of the pteridophytes are used as food in few places, and most of the pteridophytes are used, these ferns are used in decorative purpose or ornamental plants agi use ಮಾಡ್ತಾರೆ. Okay, next we have studied about the gymnosperms here, and we have studied different classes of the pteridophytes, that is Xylopsida, Lycopsida, Phenopsida and Pteropsida. Okay, next gymnosperms. In gymnosperms we have, which is advanced type of plant where we can see the well developed vascular system. Okay, the plant body may be highly branched and they may grow in extreme environmental conditions. We can see in all the environmental conditions, you can see well developed leaf system, stem system and roots with association, different mycorrhizal and coralloid root formation will be there. And also we have studied the cones, strobilus, about the strobilus and sporophyll, that is a spore bearing structure, leaf structure will call it as sporophyll. And we have studied about the male and female cones, how they are developed, and they are usually and how the fertilization takes place in a gymnosperms. Next we studied about the angiosperms, which is also called as flowering plants, and they give very beautiful flowers, which it is nothing but the reproductive structure of the plant. Flowers are nothing but the reproductive organ of the plant, where it contains male and female reproductive structure, that is androecium and gynoecium, or stamens and pistils. And stamens contain two structure, that is filament and anther. Here pistil contain ovary, style and stigma. Okay, and we have studied about the formation of gametophyte. Here pollen grains are the male gametophyte, and the embryo sac will call it as a female gametophyte, and this give rise to the egg, and the male gamete, egg is a female gamete, and here in pollen grains we can see the male gametes, and that lead to the formation of we have studied about the double fertilization, and we have studied about the important concept, that is pollination, how the transfer of pollen grains into the stigma, that will call it as pollination. And we have studied the fertilization and how the seed will be formed and how the fruit will be formed. Okay, next we studied at last we studied about the life cycle of the plant, and also we have studied the alteration of generation, and why this alteration of generation is important in plants. Okay, based on this alteration of generation, there are 3 different types of the life cycle, that is haplontic life cycle, diplontic life cycle and haplodiplontic life cycle. So, and we have for each of the life cycle we have studied the examples and how they takes place. Okay, this is about the plant kingdom, very important, maybe asked, the technical terms may be asked, and definitions may be asked, and characters asked for your examination. Thank you, my dear students.
Don't forget to like our video and subscribe our YouTube channel for all the updates.